Awesome. I think it's finally loaded. Okay. Kia ora tātou, nau mai, haere mai, kei te kōrero o te rā. So let's get into some reading. Today's live reading, I thought I'd do a chapter from Josefa and the Vu. Their chapters for this book are a lot shorter, so it's good for a little bite-sized chunk reading if you prefer that. So this book is about Josefa. He's I think he's around 13 years old, doesn't really say. And he meets a spiritual ancestor called the Vu, which is a Fijian warrior spirit, ancestral spirit. And everything in his life starts turning upside down as soon as this Vu appears. And the school bully ends up stealing a precious family heirloom called a tabua, which I think it's a whale's tooth. And so he goes on this crazy adventure trying to get the tabua back. So the book themes are perseverance and family as well. There's lots of messages about family being the most important thing. What else? Yeah, do ask me some comments if you want to in the comment section. If you have any questions, things like that. If there's words you're not sure of, there's a lot of Fijian words in this book. Some of them I know what they mean and I can sort of say, but some of them I'm not too sure on myself, so we can have a look into that. Cool. So without further ado, I think we'll start chapter 1 of Josefa and the Vu. Here we go. Josefa ran faster. He could hear his heart beating against his chest, and sweat was beginning to slide down his t-shirt. He looked down at his chubby body and wished he could move more quickly. In 3 minutes, the bell would ring, and he'd be late for the first day back at school. Good luck, bro, his brother Timoti called out cheekily before whizzing past him on his bike. Timoti was fit and fast. He had even further to go to get to intermediate school, but Josefa felt sure he'd managed to cycle there in time. Josefa reached the field and could see some other kids running in the distance. Maybe he would make it. The bell rang and Josefa stopped short, puffing loudly. There was no point running now. The hall doors were already shut. It wasn't the best start to a new term. Oh, I've lost my place. It wasn't the best start to a new term. He had been woken that morning by Timoti bouncing his basketball down the hallway. The ball crashed loudly against the walls. Timoti was crazy about basketball. He wanted to get so good he could be chosen for the NBA in America. Josefa didn't think there was much chance of that, but Timoti talked about it like it was a sure thing. Josefa pulled himself out of bed. He could hear Mosesi and Solomone arguing in the kitchen. He knew Mum was still asleep after working a late shift that night before, and Dad would have left early to go to the factory. As usual, Mosesi and Solomone were left in charge of getting their younger brothers ready for school. Oh man, why'd you have to eat all the cereal? You eat like a here we go, here's the first word. You eat like a vawuka, like a pig, laughed Solomone. Mum and Dad were always telling him off for clowning around. The only thing he was serious about was sport. Watch your mouth. I have to eat like that. That's how come I can captain the first 15. That's how come I'm so much faster than you. Mosesi was pretty serious. All he wanted to be was an All Black. That's only because I'm 14 and you're 16, fool. When I'm your age, I'll be twice as fast. That's what Dad says. Dad didn't say that, Mosesi replied hotly. Did too. Did not. Did too. Even though they wouldn't admit it, Mosesi and Solomone, the eldest, were very alike. They looked similar too, tall and solid like their dad. Timoti was closest to Josefa, a best friend as well as a brother. He liked telling jokes and playing tricks on people. Recently, though, he seemed more interested in playing sports with his older brothers. Josefa ran into the kitchen. What time is it? He called. 8:45, Timoti replied absent-mindedly, still bouncing the ball. Why didn't you wake me up? Josefa grumbled. He was already running late. His brothers just looked at him, but he could tell by their goofy grins that they thought it was quite funny that he had slept in. You can always go to school like that, Solomone said, pointing to Josefa's pajamas, but Josefa was far too busy running for the shower to listen. Gosh, she's getting in the shower. Josefa crept towards the hall door, his heart still thudding. He pushed on the door softly, hoping he could slip in without anyone looking at him, but it creaked loudly, and he saw a wave of faces turning to watch him. Mrs. Bulls, the principal, was glowering at him. She had short grey hair like a poodle and was wearing a navy skirt and jacket with an ugly gold brooch. Josefa noticed the blue eye shadow creeping into the lines around her narrowed eyes. "Do you have a note to explain your lateness, Josefa Nabula?" she asked. "No, sorry, miss," he mumbled. "Excuse me, Josefa, I don't believe I heard your answer." "I'm sorry I don't have a late note, Mrs. Bulls," Josefa said, wishing he could sink through the floor. "I believe you mean you're sorry for being late," said Mrs. Bulls sharply. Some of the kids laughed. "Well, that will be a lunchtime pickup. You can meet me in room 1 at 12:30 exactly." She signalled for him to sit down and continued her speech about the new term. Josefa had been told last year that he would be in Miss Folly's class, and she saw her standing next to the row of children who would be his new classmates. Miss Folly was wearing a bright pink sari and a lot of gold bracelets around her wrist. She kept leaning forward on her toes and rocking back onto her heels, and Josefa wondered if she was bored with Mrs. Bull's speech as well. He looked down the line of kids to see if any of his friends had been put in the same class. Sitting next to Matthew Pheasant and Connor Blakely was Jack Bucksworth. Josefa groaned. He could see Jack whispering to Connor when the teacher wasn't looking. Jack had red blonde hair, pale blue eyes, and dark brown freckles. He was wearing a blue singlet and had tan lines on his arms. The back of his neck was slightly red with sunburn. Last year, Jack used to tease Josefa and call him Fatty or Fat Boy. He wasn't even in the same class. Connor Blakely was a tall and skinny boy with bright blonde hair. He was smiling wildly and looking around to make sure everyone could see that Jack had chosen him as his friend. Then Connor noticed Josefa looking at him. He whispered to Jack, and they both turned around and sniggered. Josefa turned back towards Mrs. Bulls, trying to ignore them. A high-pitched giggling seemed to rise up from the back of the room, and Josefa turned sharply. What kid would dare to make a noise like that in assembly? But none of the other kids seemed to notice. In fact, Mrs. Bulls just kept on talking. The giggling didn't stop. It got louder, changing into a gruff chuckle. Josefa looked at the teachers standing by their class rows at the sides of the hall, but none of them tried to find out where the noise was coming from. He looked back at Jack and Connor. Maybe they were making the noise, trying to tease him. Maybe Jack had some new expensive electronic toy that would make noises like that. Connor was just staring off into space, but Jack's face was scrunched up into a scowl. His hands were pressed firmly against his ears, and his face was going bright red. Josefa realized with a shock, whatever the noise was, Jack could hear it too. In fact, judging by his expression, Jack was finding it more annoying than Josefa was. When the lunch bell rang, Josefa walked to room 1, dragging his feet. Mrs. Bulls was already there, standing with her arms folded in front of her. "Well, Josefa," she said abruptly, "at our morning staff meeting, your kind teacher, Miss Folly, pointed out that lunchtime pickup might not be in line with our healthy children policy. She feels strongly that lunchtime is for eating lunch. It seems Miss Folly believes that eating lunch is more important than conservation and prevention of pollution." Josefa doubted that Miss Folly would actually have said something like that. "My intention," continued Mrs. Wills, "was not to stop you from eating your lunch. You understand that, don't you, Josefa?" Josefa looked down at his shoelaces. "Now, seeing as Miss Folly is so concerned with your health," said Mrs. Bulls, with what looked like a glimmer of a smile, "I've decided instead of picking up rubbish, you can run around the school field 3 times. Then you can go and eat your lunch." She looked at Josefa triumphantly. When Josefa got to the field, he looked back and saw Mrs. Bulls watching him from the room 1 window. The sun beamed down on him like a heavy coat as he started his slow circle of the field. He wished that he had some of the natural sporting ability of his 3 older brothers. Instead of being the odd one out, they could do this easy. The grass was thin and dead on top of the baked earth, and the ground felt hard beneath him. As he rounded the side of the field, he noticed some of the kids staring at him from the jungle gym. "There goes Fat Boy," laughed Jack Bucksworth from the swing bridge. Fat Boy, chorused Connor and Matt. Josefa felt totally humiliated. He looked up at Mrs. Bulls, but of course she couldn't hear anything from inside the classroom. He kept on running. On the second circuit, he was feeling okay. Sure, He could feel sweat beginning to burst on his forehead and his thighs were rubbing uncomfortably, but most of the kids had got bored watching. They were getting on with their own lunchtime games. When he saw he was once again approaching Jack and Connor, he tried not to look at them. He looked down at the field and kept running. Fat Boy needs a new name, Jake announced loudly. From now on, we're going to call him Chubster. Chubster, echoed Connor, pretending to fall on the ground laughing. Josefa felt blood rushing to his face, and the slow ache of Stitch creeping into his side. One more lap to go. He tried to run a little faster, but his shoe came down on top of his shoelace and tripped forward, landing on his knees. Once again he heard laughter echoing from the other side of the field. He slowly stood up, brushing grass and dirt from his knees. They were bleeding from hitting the baked ground. He didn't even bother looking back at the window. He didn't want Mrs. Bulls to see the tears that rose up in his eyes. He tried to continue running, but his knees ached badly. Josefa's chest felt tight and he was beginning to feel dizzy. The sun seemed even hotter in the clear blue sky, and he wondered if he could go on. There was just over half of the field to go, but he felt shaky and strange. As he looked in front of him, Josefa saw a shimmering pool of light moving towards him like a giant heat wave. He tried to refocus his eyes. The light seemed to be changing shape and moving even faster. Then it began to change color, becoming a soft blue shadow shaped like a human. Josefa looked away. Maybe it was a cloud of dust. He tried to keep running, but he felt ready to collapse. The shadow came in beside him and kept pace. Josefa felt a rush of cold air and shivered violently. He tried to push the shadow away, but his arm went right through it. His legs shook. He looked at the other kids to see if they were scared, but they were continuing their games. No one seemed to notice the figure beside him. Then Josefa heard a voice that terrified him. He bent down and let himself fall to the ground. The voice said something that could only be meant for Josefa, only be meant for him. Josefa Naibula, it said. As Josefa looked at the shadow, he began to see it wasn't a shadow at all. It cleared as it sharpened by a camera lens, and a warrior stood before him. The warrior wore a leaf sulu and had a large kore shell tied with coconut husk cord around his neck. His hair was styled elaborately with a large bone comb fastening. Both his ears were long and pierced. In his hand he carried a huge club, intricately carved out of wood. Josefa leant away from the warrior, afraid that he would be clubbed to death. Josefa, said the warrior, I am your Vu. I am your ancestor spirit. I am here to protect you. That's a funny way of showing it, Josefa said, still shaking. Then he remembered his parents always telling him to be polite to his elders. Would the Vu be offended? The Vu didn't reply, it just looked at him. Josefa, I am here to protect you, it said again. Now get up and run. Josefa looked up to see Mrs. Bulls marching towards him. He turned back to the Vu, but it had disappeared into the air. Josefa, I said run, said Mrs. Bulls. What are you doing sitting on the ground? Josefa pointed to his knees, but they were no longer bloody. They were completely healed over as if he had fallen weeks ago. There was nothing to do but start running again, except this time he set off to finish the rest of the circuit. He felt a new energy inside him. He felt sure the Vu was still somewhere close by. That's much better, Josefa, said Mrs. Bulls. Josefa was tired. He took his lunch down to the corner of the field where he could lean against the trunk of a tall tree and sit in the gentle shade, sipping his water bottle. What had just happened to him? He tried to figure out whether the vision he had seen was really a spirit of an ancestor or just the heat playing tricks on him. He rubbed his knees. The skin on his kneecaps felt soft and new. Josefa thought about his grandfather. He missed him so much. His grandfather would have known what to make of this strange happening. A dark cloud was gathering over the field, even though the rest of the sky still seemed bright in sunlight. The cloud made Josefa shiver, although the day was still hot. What was happening? Was the Vu back? Josefa had a feeling that it was something different. The air seemed to get thicker around him, and as the cloud moved over the field, it shifted. Josefa started to notice bits of rubbish all over the field. The rubbish bins were tipped over. Now there were chip packets and muesli bar wraps and banana skins and drink bottles scattered everywhere. Flies were buzzing around, angry, as if the black cloud had woken them up. The field looked so disgusting that Josefa couldn't look at it anymore. He gazed up into the tree above him. There, Hanging from a high branch was a thin girl with long black hair and a ponytail. Hi, she said softly, letting herself drop to a lower branch. I'm Ming. I'm in your class. Josefa looked up at her and realized that he recognized her. I've seen you at Chan's Bakery in Brown Street, he said, finally grinning. Ming laughed. Of course you have. I'm Ming Chan. My parents own the bakery. Josefa was impressed. Chan's Bakery made really yummy pies and buns. You're so lucky, he said. Ming looked puzzled. I guess so, she said thoughtfully. She quickly flipped herself around a tree branch. So what do you think of Miss Folly? She asked. Josefa shrugged. I don't really know yet. She seems nice, I guess. Ming flipped herself again so that this time she was standing next to him. I think she's really nice, she said matter-of-factly. She's heaps nicer than Mrs. Bulls. Josefa agreed silently, but he remembered something else from last term. Didn't Mrs. Bulls make it all that fuss about you in assembly, about how you were in top math and reading? He smiled widely. And she got you to play the piano for the whole school. Ming rolled her eyes and climbed back up into the tree. She looked at Josefa crossly. Just because my parents make me work hard, so what? I don't care about that stuff anyway. Josefa realized that he had hurt her feelings. Maybe she was embarrassed about being so smart. I think it's cool, he said slowly. You could be a scientist or a composer or something. Ming smiled and shrugged her shoulders. I told you I don't care about all that. When I grow up, I want to be a stunt woman. A what? You know, they explained a stunt woman, like in the movies. They do all the moves for the actors. I want to do all the fighting and the rock climbing and falling down high cliffs, stuff like that. That's really cool, said Josefa. She must be really brave. The bell rang, and as they walked back towards the class together, Josefa felt someone shove him from behind. Looks like Chubster finally has a friend, bellowed Jack. Connor pulled a face at him, rolling his eyes. Chubster, he mocked. Josefa felt embarrassed. He looked at Ming, but could see that she was acting like she hadn't heard them. Jack didn't like being ignored. Is Chubster your friend, you geeky Chinese? He asked, standing in front of her. Ming straightened her back and stepped closer to him. What did you call me? She said quietly. Jack grinned stupidly. Geek, he started, but he didn't finish. Ming had tipped her drink bottle all over his head. Orange juice ran down his face and shirt, and he stepped back, stunned. Teacher, yelled Connor. Miss Folly came out of the classroom. She looked at Jack, who was whining. Who did this to Jack? She asked, looking to the sea of children gathering around. Ming did it, said Connor, pointing. Ming went bright red, and Miss Folly looked at her thoughtfully. Ming, that's really not acceptable. Jack, go to the washroom and clean yourself up. Everybody else, show's over. Go to class. After school, Josefa leant against the school gate, waiting for Timothy to come past. Sometimes he walked home on his own, but today he wanted to catch Timothy on his bike so they could talk about the VU without his older brothers there. Sometimes it was hard to get a moment alone. Timothy came flying past, but he saw Josefa and pulled to a halt. He hopped off the bike and walked back to Josefa. How was school, little brother? He called out happily, pushing some hair out of his face. Timothy had wild, woolly hair that came down as far as his chin. Mum and Dad wanted him to have it cut short and into a short afro like Solomone, or wear it in cornrows like Mosesi, but Timothy liked looking scruffy. He thought it looked cool. School was okay, mumbled Josefa. Timothy looked at Josefa's face, and his own smile faded. Don't lie to me, boy, he said, pretending to be angry. I can tell something's wrong, he added kindly, as Josefa started walking towards home. If I tell you, you're not allowed to tell everybody. Timothy shrugged his shoulders. Me? I won't tell anything. Josefa looked at him. Sometimes it was hard to know if he was joking. I'm serious, Timothy. Okay, I won't tell. Okay, well, something really strange happened today. I saw something, Josefa said. Like a burglary? Asked Timothy excitedly. He liked crime shows. No, said Josefa, like a spirit. A ghost? Timothy was shocked. No, Josefa explained. Just listen, will you? I was running around the field and I saw a spirit. Why were you running around the field? Josefa groaned. Mrs. Bulls made me. Anyway, that's not the point. I saw a spirit of an ancestor. Maybe you got sunstroke and started imagining things. I don't think so, Josefa, suddenly unsure. I don't know about these things, said Timothy authoritatively. You're probably hallucinating. Josefa didn't agree, but Timothy was convinced. Seemed he wasn't going to listen. Maybe, Josefa said before changing the subject. He was going to have to figure out what it meant by himself. The rest of the way home, Timoti told jokes and laughed at his own stories about what was happening at school. Josefa could tell that Timoti was really excited to be back with his classmates, so he just left Timoti chuckle on without paying too much attention. Josefa had his own problems to think about. Josefa found his thoughts returning to his grandfather. He felt a deep sadness. Grandfather had died last year, and Josefa missed him. Grandfather used to tell him stories about the old days in Fiji. He was the wisest person that Josefa knew, and he would have known whether the VU was real or not. His grandfather would have helped him understand. I'm here to protect you, the VU had said. Josefa didn't feel safe. Protection was fine, but from what? Josefa thought again about the dark cloud and the pollution on the school field. He wondered if it had been a sign of something more sinister. Was the VU telling him he was in real danger? And that's the end of chapter 1. So a lot shorter than our other story we were looking at. So we will definitely continue this one. So we've been introduced to the VU a little bit, seen what he's about. I'm not sure if he's a good guy, a bad guy. We'll kind of find out as the story goes on. Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed. Do subscribe if you want to come back for the story again. Comment if you have any questions about it. And yeah, hopefully see you guys next week on Monday. Ka kite.